Good morning. It's 8 o'clock here at the intersection of faith, civic, community leaders. Been meeting ever since near the beginning of COVID. So 3 years every Thursday morning except Thanksgiving. And it's just great to see you here again. We're going to be talking about some environmental things today. So the care of the earth and the cry of the earth. And so it's great to have all of you with us. Any announcements this morning that people wish to share while we wait just for a few others to make their way on screen? I'm going to jump in. Some May things besides Fiesta going on. May 2nd. I can put these things in chat, but I also encourage you just to write them down. There's an extraordinary opportunity. The doors open at 8 in the morning, and the blessing of the building is from 8:30 to 9:30. Girls Inc. Girls Inc. They took a congregational facility and refit it into their school, which I cannot tell you, it's worth going just for the tour. There's one room that there's entrepreneur room, and they've got the New York Stock Exchange ticker on the wall going, and the kitchen. I mean, it's worth the tour, but they are blessing the building that day. Again, May 2nd, Girls Inc. I think the address is 2214 West Bassey Road, but you'll have to Google that. As far as I know, it's probably the first blessing of its kind that it's all women faith leaders who are doing the blessing because it's Girls Inc. So that's kind of extraordinary. Again, that's May 2nd. The doors open at 8 and the blessings 8:30 to 9:30, and they will be having tours. May 8th is the Mental Health Resourcing Day with sacred.org at the Neighborhood Place. And Bill, you're going to jump in and you're going to say the doors open at?
The doors open at about 8:15. There will be breakfast refreshments served, and we're going to go through noon, and we have three movements. We'll have a panel on mental health services and resourcing for youth, and then we'll have a second panel on mental health resourcing and services for community and faith groups. And then we're going to have Anne take us through a community conversation about how we go out and change the world right after that. So it'll be an action-oriented day. So May 8th, 8:15 to noon. It's going to be great at the Neighborhood Place. We've already have 102 people registered. So we're looking for, the room will hold 150. So don't dawdle, get your registration in. I put a link in the chat.
Bring a friend or a team member with you. It's a great way to get work done, right? Is to go to something like that, and then you can actually crunch actions out together. Then on May 18th, which is a Saturday, TEDx San Antonio is doing a day on compassion, care, and community. They had 290 people apply to speak at this TEDx, and it was global. And I want to meet those 283 people because there are other people, because there was only 7. If you've not been TEDx in San Antonio, it is really worth going to. They do an amazing job, and it's like watching any other professional TED presentation, but it's all day on compassion. It's from 10 a.m. to 3. Again, it's a Saturday, May 18th, and it's at Northwest Vista College. There are tickets. We generally don't, we try to do low, no cost things, but I think this one's really worth going to. I'm going to be there, of course. So compassion is on the move. We got some really great things coming with compassion. A citywide campaign, national campaign. We're going to be hearing about it at the intersection, but I'm going to pass it quick to Doug because he's waving at me. Yes, Doug.
Got to take it off mute. I just want to make an announcement on May 10th. It's Mental Health Awareness Day celebration at St. Philip's College at 11:30. There is a registration link, and I'll try to send it, and maybe I can send it to you and you can send it out. It's free. We want everybody to come out. We've done this in Bexar County, so it'll be NAMI, Bexar County, and St. Philip's College who are helping sponsor this. But we've done this for years, that on one day, we all try to come together to celebrate mental health awareness. So I want to invite everybody on the call to come out to St. Philip's College at 11:30 a.m.
You also might want to put that link into chat. People can copy paste that real quick. So it's 8:06, and I want to welcome Thomas, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your last name, Marchetti, correctly. This is the first time I've met him, so this is very exciting for me too. I'm meeting somebody new. But John introduced us, and that Thomas did his master's on what he's about to share with us. And I haven't heard it. I'm just excited because it's usually, you know this, usually I have some idea of what we're going to be hearing. I do have some idea, but we're all going to be learning together this morning. So I'm really excited about that. So Thomas, thanks for being with us today. And I'm just going to turn the screen over to you.
All right, thank you, Anne. I will share my screen. Can everyone see the screen?
Can everybody also see that he's went to Texas A&M?
Yeah. Trying to, here we go. Okay, yeah, thank you for that introduction. As Ann said, I just graduated with my master's degree from Texas A&M College Station in biological and agricultural engineering, and I had the really unique opportunity to do my thesis on some of what I'm about to present to you, hopefully in a brief but understandable manner. They said I did my thesis on it, so I could probably speak on it at length, but I'll try to be brief. So today we're going to try to talk about responding to the cry of the earth and adopting sustainable lifestyles, and try to make it as relevant as possible to the locality of San Antonio, Texas. So a little background about myself. Before I went to Texas A&M, I was working at the Little Flower Basilica and kind of a maintenance role. So I became very aware of, I guess, maybe more intimate details of church, and bringing my faith background to Texas A&M, I didn't want to leave that behind. It was very relevant to me. So whenever I approached my professor in biological and agricultural engineering, his background, his research area is in what is called the water energy food nexus. And his approach to things, his studies, is that water systems, food systems, and energy systems are generally what we call managed in a siloed approach, where energy is produced for its own sake, water produced, consumed, purified for its own sake, and food for its own sake, without too much consideration about how these systems interact. So what my professor and his cohort notes is that about 70% of the water that we take from the earth is used for food production. Much of water we use is needed for energy production in forms of producing steam for electric generation. Food can be used for energy production in terms of corn for producing ethanol, and so on and so forth. So we're trying to look towards more of a dialogical approach between all of these resource pools and what we call a nexus approach in water, energy, food nexus. So looking at all of the interconnections for maybe a more responsible management structure. Texas A&M has what's called the Water, Energy, Food Nexus Initiative, which is very interdisciplinary, tries to look at social, economic, these kind of engineering, problem solving backgrounds to managing resources for sustainability and responsible stewardship for our future. So trying to tie these two things together, the church and kind of a scientific mindset kind of overview of things was tricky, to say the least. However, my professor was very supportive. He thought that, kind of looking from a faith perspective, that churches and religions could have lots to say about sustainable development and responsible environmental stewardship. And it's not just the Catholic Church, it goes across the board as far as Muslim, Hindu. I was at a presentation this last week, and there was a list of probably about 20 or 25 different religions that have some sort of official statements about responsible stewardship of resources. And so, yeah, bringing these together, I came to, since I was coming from the Catholic background, I came along the path of what is called the Laudato Si Action Platform, which was developed under the authority of the Vatican's dicastery for promoting integral human development. So that's a mouthful, but it's basically the department of the Vatican that's concerned with care for the poor and care for the environment, as inspired by Pope Francis's recent teaching document called Laudato Si. Much could be say about this document, which was given in 2015, and how it went along with kind of a global movement towards sustainability that also had a parallel in the United Nations Climate Conference 21, COP21, where there is an agreement for nations to try to limit their carbon emissions to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius on average across the world. I'll try not to go into too many details, but this is where I kind of ended up as far as merging faith and science together. So moving ahead, these are the goals of the Laudato Si Action Platform, and very universal goals: responding to the cry of the earth, our common home; responding to the cry of the poor, those in need; ecological economics, so spending and financial resources in ways that is good and responsible for the earth as well; adoption of sustainable lifestyles, ecological education, ecological spirituality; community resilience and empowerment. In practical terms, for my thesis, I focus mostly on response to the cry of the earth and adoption of sustainable lifestyles. It was just most feasible in terms of scientific assessment, I guess, to look at those two goals in particular. So on the platform, there's a whole list of suggested actions. You have to back up a little bit. The platform is sort of a three-step process. You go in, you kind of do a self-assessment, and this can be at a family level, a parish, a diocesan level, different institution levels and things like that. I was looking at mostly on a household level for my study. And yeah, these are some of the kind of actions that I picked out as far as promoting sustainable development. That was reducing food waste, changing diet to less meat, more plant-based, looking at energy systems as far as introducing solar energy to one's home, reducing HVAC, so kind of air conditioning and heating, through kind of turning back your thermostat. So it's a very much actions that anybody could do on the personal household level, reducing vehicle travel and installing kind of low flow water fixtures and reducing landscape irrigation. And this diagram isn't too important, but this kind of just shows whenever I was making the assessment, there's a lot to go into which actions were deemed more sustainable than others, and it had to do with combinations of how much water, energy, and food was used, as well as the land area footprint, financial costs, carbon emissions, and yeah, those 6 things were what I considered. Okay. There we go. Yeah, so while I look at kind of a religious standpoint at all, and that's because religious subpopulations make up a large segment of the population in San Antonio. Of course, I was concerned in my study more about the Catholic population, but as I said, these actions are really universal actions that aren't necessarily based on one's faith in particular. And again, I was looking, how much do people with faith and the Catholic faith, how much do they care about different actions? And this is according to a Pew Research study in 2022. So overall, it looks like, Catholics are agreeable as far as, we have the duty to protect the earth and make an effort, and they generally do make an effort to reduce water consumption, conserve energy. There are some things that are less, probably need a little bit more work, and it has to do with maybe some more practical issues. And, how are we conserving energy? Well, as far as driving less or carpooling, there's about 54% that say that they actually try to do that. For those who try to consume less meat, it's about 43%. So it could use some more work. And as far as whether or not climate change is human caused, that's kind of, 50-50, anybody's guess there, coming from a faith background. So yeah, more analysis, but as far as what on average a San Antonio person consumes, this is kind of an overview as far as where different resources are allocated to. So as far as water use, you think, well, I'd probably use most of my water from my faucets and my water fixtures in my house and maybe my irrigation. But no, according to what I found, actually 75% of your water footprint comes through the food that you eat, because so much water is used for crop production. And another large segment of water is used for energy production as well. Now, I need to update this as far as how much energy is used. And I'm going to go to the next slide because it gives more of a yeah, this is the same thing, but just kind of separated and relativized a little bit more. As far as energy production, you can see that most of our energy use is in the gasoline that we use for our cars, but another large segment is from the electricity that we use in our homes. And then lastly, the natural gas that we use in our homes for cooking and heating. As far as food footprint, surprisingly, you think, I just eat the food that I eat is what I eat in my home or at a restaurant or whatever. But as far as calories consumed, this energy bar here represents how much calories. This is from corn used for ethanol production. So quite a lot of energy or food production as far as corn goes into the production of bioethanol, which goes into our cars. And finally, as far as where do our carbon emissions come from, again, quite a bit, it comes through our energy use. This is all of the energy aggregated together, but even more comes from the food that we eat. And I didn't even consider in my study how much of our carbon emissions comes through the actual like concrete objects we can consume, as far as like electronics or things that we don't eat but that we actually buy. The manufacturing of those products also takes a carbon footprint that is substantial, but I didn't include that in the scope of my study. And then finally, land area is about 2.5 acres for food production, and this is all on a yearly basis. So the food that each person consumes on a yearly basis takes about 2.5 acres of land to produce. That was, for me, that was an interesting result. And then this is how, I'm sure maybe people are aware more of their budgets, but on average, this is how it kind of boiled down to, as far as how much money people use on food consumption, energy consumption, and water consumption throughout the year. So don't want to go through all these details here because it kind of gets complicated, but this is just showing that if the different actions are adopted, how much of a change it has in each of those systems, as far as water, energy, food, land use, carbon emissions, and costs. That was food interventions, energy interventions, water interventions. It all boiled down to that, in the end, at least from my findings, the most overall significant things that we could do is actually a combination of not wasting food and eating a little bit less meat. However, reducing travel and HVAC use also has an overall impact, but maybe less significant. That's what I talk about here. And so, yeah, that's kind of a brief overview. I know it's maybe a lot to take in. I don't know if there's questions or anything like that.
Well, what I think is interesting, Thomas, is that you, not a pun here, but you boiled it down to one thing that all of us can do. All that research, right? And it coming down to what can really help is what we eat, how we conserve that. I know there's so many things that we can do, but and we need many things, right? But I really appreciate that. And also that intersection of research and faith and care of the planet. It's an important intersection because it teaches us a lot. We can find out a lot in terms of humans and how we act and how we contribute, right? It all is connected. I know that Karen Ball has a question. Karen, did you just want to ask it? She put it into chat, but
I can do that. Hi, Thomas.
Hello.
So I'm kind of thinking in terms of, all the different intersections of the carbon footprint in terms of food and everything. So one, we tend to have a food system that is a monoculture, which is not good for the environment. And then two, the energy to transport food to locations where people can go and purchase the food also contributes to not helping the planet. So my question is coming out of that frame, and it is, would it help lower those food emissions that you were showing, and also the energy, the transportation cost, if say like all of the neighborhood associations across San Antonio, and there's lots of them, had community gardens, and those were like irrigated and cared for by the local neighborhood. Would that help lower some of the admissions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have any concrete data to support maybe my opinion on this. However, yeah, as far as reducing like transportation costs, it could possibly do that. However, I did see a study that said that transportation emissions is actually a very minuscule amount of the carbon emissions of the total production in the food system. And it's like 1 or 2%. It's just that, yeah, there's so much food gets transported whenever you kind of divide it between the goods being transported, it's very small amount. Now, I mean, there could be other considerations here. Your local food garden, of course, is going to be produced and harvested by hand. You know, the soil that you're planting it in, and if you're adding fertilizers or not, if you're just going to do manure. And I mean, yeah, as far as, carbon emissions, it may or may not make a big difference. There are other considerations that could help it to maybe be a beneficial community project that contribute to people's overall health. And I think that's maybe, I come with all of this numbers and background and stuff, but I guess key word here is integral human development. I mean, it's more than just, reducing emissions. There's more of, you wanting to build community here and healthy lifestyles and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but as far as carbon emissions, I would have to do some more research about that to give an educated answer.
So we're going to take a pause here for a moment, but before we do that, I'm going to put out a question for everybody for conversation. But again, I really appreciate, Thomas, you talking about this from your faith perspective.
Mhm.
And it wouldn't make any difference what religion we're talking about, but that kind of critical thinking through the not just lens of your faith, but your world in that direction, and then what that tells you. So the question I want to put out to everybody before I pause is pretty blatant here. We normally have twice as many people participating at the intersection on Thursday morning. And don't take it personally, Thomas, but one of the things that we have learned, Thomas, is that the initiatives across the country through the faith community that have the largest impact are those that are near, you're going to have to listen carefully to these words, near geographic proximity to the need or the problem. The other element is that the initiatives, faith initiatives across the country that have the largest impact are also those human needs that are closest to the ground in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So food, housing, security. You can't get any closer to the ground than the earth and what we walk on. So this question is to everyone, and I'm asking our critical thinking skills to go into high gear. But why is it that when we talk about the earth, its sustainability, its future for our children and children's children, why is it that more people of faith don't show up to that initiative? So here's my pause, and you're all going to think about that. And I see Bill has his hand up, but it's 8:29. And I see that a few people have already left because we make that commitment, compassionate respect for everybody's lives and days. And so some have gone on to other meetings, and we try to get the meat of the briefing always before 8:30. And so Thomas, thank you for that, because you did that. And next week, we're going to be hearing from our international officer in the city. Sherry's going to be bringing to us a summit that's happening in San Antonio entitled the All America Summit. We will have mayors and ambassadors, representatives from all of the Americas coming together at the end of May here in San Antonio. And all of you can be a part of it and go for nothing if you volunteer, but it's an important summit and it's happening here in San Antonio. So we're going to hear about that at the intersection next week. So I'm hoping, Thomas, you can stay with us just a little bit longer and for some more conversation. And Bill, I'm going to pass it to you.
Thank you. So, Thomas, I think I really appreciate your spending the time and sharing your work and your findings with us. I wanted to ask a question about food waste, because I know you talked about that as being one of the major contributors to, major things that we can take action on to do. So, can you quantify what do you mean by food waste? So, I hear two things in that. One is what purchasing or food that's produced and then not eaten, right? And winds up, in a landfill or, in some other non-useful manner. The second half of that is the kind of the inedible pieces of the food that is produced. So, peels and pits and things like that.
Right.
So when you talk about food waste, what are you really talking about? And what are the major action items for reducing food waste?
Right. Yeah, that's a fair question. So, I mean, this is according to USDA, about 40 or it's like 30 to 40% of our food is considered to be wasted. And you're right, some of that is inedible waste. So whenever you factor out the inedible parts of our food waste, I believe it comes down to more like 20 to 25% of our food is wasted. And that's still significant. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. So yeah, as far as drawing down carbon emissions from reducing food waste, you're saying, well, we spent some emissions to make this food. Now, if we're just going to waste it, then that's emissions that didn't go to a positive use as far as feeding people.
You think about all the food waste in our homes, but in restaurants and in other ways. Yeah, but I guess we just need to learn how to eat the peels and the pits, right? How to so that's one way to get around that one, but don't know if that works either, right?
So I would have a quick follow-up there if I could. So I think it's, if we're reducing food waste, so obviously the way to reduce food waste is to buy less or to try to eat less or to make sure you eat more of what you purchase, right? That would eventually lead to a reduction in your purchase, which in theory would lead to a reduction in production, right? But how long does that take? If I reduce my food waste from 20 to 30% down to 5%, how long does that take for it to actually work through the production, systems in the markets to actually reduce the fossil fuel emissions that are used to produce all that excess food? Or maybe it gets redistributed.
Thomas, you are going to spin our minds if you know that answer. So go.
And maybe that's not a fair question, but that's
wow.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's beyond my scope of knowledge. I think that's more an economics question. Which
may I throw something into this conversation? That I want you to know that the Alamo Dome has gone into composting food waste. And I am at the University of the Incarnate Word, and we have gone into composting food waste. So we encourage students not to eat all their food in the cafeteria, but if they don't eat all their food in the cafeteria, it goes into compost, and we are paying compost queens to come and pick up the food waste at Incarnate Word. So anyway, also in the community garden, in our gardening at Incarnate Word, we try to teach food waste. And forgive me for jumping into an Incarnate Word thing, but we pledged to follow the Pope's action plan for sustainability about the same time that it came out. And yesterday I led a Zoom with the University of the Incarnate Word branches in Mexico City, Irapuato, Mexico, and our people in Peru. And in the city of San Antonio, St. Mary's University, Our Lady of the Lake University, Oblate School of Theology, and Incarnate Word are trying as higher education places to commit ourselves and be serious about care of creation.
It's good to hear about these actions. That's where we get hope, but we also get examples and models of how we could be working and acting together. And it's necessary. It's not just even important, it's necessary. So thank you for sharing that. Any thoughts on my question? Why don't we show up to this?
Because it's Fiesta.
Oh, that's not today. That's today. But that's not, I mean, we're talking about across the board and time, you know? And you're probably right. Today it might be that, but it's not just today. And we know that, right? And it's great to hear about Incarnate Word stepping up like that with Oblate and with others. It's critical. And I think that's what we could all be doing. Peter.
Thank you, Anne, and thanks for the presentation, Thomas. Really great data. And I was born and raised Catholic, and so I understand it rather well. And here recently, I've been reaching out to different parishes. And so just a question about the, and kind of to Anne's point, right? I mean, because this is across the board, but have you found any interest within any of the parishes in San Antonio that are really doing this type of work? And I'll give an example of one group that I don't know that they're doing much specific to this, but related to helping with the utility bills, which is the St. Vincent de Paul Texas Regional organization, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which does great work. I mean, it's been doing work for years, and the area I'm really interested in is that, and I know you're the Cry of the Earth, but one of those items that you referenced, which was community resiliency and empowerment. I'm really working to develop that component, and it's multifaceted with energy efficiency, weatherization, and resiliency being really at the hub of how it can really be expanded. So do you have any feedback on that, on any parishes that are doing something in San Antonio that is related to that type of work?
Yeah, I'm aware of, like, Sister Martha from Incarnate Word. They're doing a lot of work there at Incarnate Word for sure. And also Oblate School of Theology, they've installed some solar panels on some of their buildings to help supply some of their energy there. But as you say, I mean, it is an integral approach. And although I, looked more at sustainability, sustainable lifestyles and the Cry of the Earth part of it, responding to the cry of the poor, I believe, is also responding to the cry of the earth. It's connected. So if we're, like the St. Vincent de Paul Society that you referenced, they're taking care of people's needs as far as, clothing. And a lot of times sometimes it's clothing and furniture and kind of non-consumable needs. But a lot of times it's secondhand things, right? So instead of taking things that would have gone to the trash, you're taking things and reusing them, and that's also responding to the cry of the earth, because you're not filling up landfills, and you're also not just turning things back into unused carbon emissions, if you want to look at it in that terms as well. I'm also aware, so I'm part of another organization called the Adopt-a-Sea movement. And it's one of the parishes in San Antonio. I think it's Mary Mother of the Church parish, which is very new. It's on the west side. They even don't have permanent buildings. They're having mass outdoors. There's at least one member there that yeah, is trying to respond to all of this.
There
Yeah, I
is,
think just to give some feedback there on Anne, something you shared that we're doing with the housing initiative, which is those navigators. Creating those navigators, I think, is critical to really getting that buy-in, where you present the information, but not just the information, but the ability to access the resources and empower. And I think that's where you really start to get that movement, because we're about serving, right? And so when you can help someone, it does something to you. There's chemicals that happen when you help someone. And so I think being very targeted with the navigators in this work, I think, and developing a navigator system that's more within the faith community, like with what Anne has been presenting here the last month or so, that I really appreciate it. So that's my thought. I think navigators are critical to that movement.
another one that really like thoroughly looked at their property, Baptist Temple on Drexel. You might want to look at that, but from solar panels, I mean, they went ground up and did this kind of whole assessment on how they were contributing both to the demise as well as to the care of Earth. And so they've just kind of refit everything to be the best caregivers, right? On their geography, right? Think about if every congregation, every gathering of people of faith everywhere in San Antonio did that, and then encouraged their people who join them, who come there, to do that at their home, right? Think of that process. So Paul, we've got 8:42 and you got your hand up.
Yes, Thomas, thank you very much. Have you and your advisor talked about what the next steps would be for you academically?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And we have really, I guess the ideal would be to find a faith community that I could engage with this data, because this has all kind of been on a theoretical basis so far, but just to find a community that could have maybe one or two different, maybe a workshop or something like that, and do a survey to ask, where they stand as far as understanding of their faith background and how that relates to environmental stewardship and care for the earth, and maybe where they stand as far as, what is their consumption levels, and maybe what things that they could change, and then kind of engage them with this data as far as some of what I presented, and also maybe thinking of the local and the bigger picture as far as, the climate is changing and we are having an effect on the earth, and maybe coming back in a month or so and seeing how either their viewpoints have changed or have not, to see how effective such an engagement was, and to see if their practices have changed or not. That is kind of where I am as far as my advisor. We would like to publish, he would like to publish something in a scientific journal about this as well, but to have kind of that practical actual interaction with the community is something that was very much needed at this point. Yeah.
So we are going to close here. Thank you. We are going to close in a minute at 8:45, but my brain is connecting here. And I was just recently told about some federal money and we're talking about in the ballpark of 2 to 3 million that could be implemented locally in San Antonio in terms of what we're talking about here. Faith community. They're really looking for locations, what they say are turnkey, but like could jump in right away, right? And do this kind of thing that we're talking about on a congregational level. Don't know what to do with that connection in my head right now. I know that I don't have the time to write a grant, but I do know personally, but I know that obviously there's a lot of potential and quite immediate that could happen if some brains connected and spaces. And John is, I guess John is wanting to say something, right, John?
Yeah. Wow. Not only in San Antonio, Fordham University recently received $51 million from the EPA to apply to climate justice. In their region, that's region 3 of EPA. We're in region 6. You talk about $2 million. Maybe there's an institution in San Antonio who could receive $50 million in order to apply it in various areas. I would love to facilitate having Thomas come to the Basilica and do his project there, but I encounter the same thing that you do in regard to just, well, lack of interest in this area. Why so? Well, various reasons, but one is that we are so engrossed in the consumer society that when we think about changing our consuming patterns and so forth and so on, when we think about the ramifications of stopping particular industries and so forth and so on, like the fossil fuel industry, it's just, it seems to be overwhelming and there's nothing we can do personally and so forth and so on. And no, I don't really want to do it because it's the results would, the ramifications would be too great for me personally.
So I'm going to close right now. It's 8:47, and but I am going to send some of you some links. There's also, it doesn't sound like much, but there are near immediate $20,000 grants that are available for faith institutions, community groups. The deadline on that grant, that 20,000 is the end of this month, April, but it's a pretty easy process, and a congregation could do quite a bit with 20,000. Doesn't sound like much, but it could. It could be a real start. So,
I agree. Thank you.
okay, I'm going to send that all out. Thank you all.
Thanks very much.
Thomas, you'll get those.
Thanks, Thomas.
All righty. You all have great days. Be
Thanks.
safe if you do any fiestaing.
God bless.